Welcome. I'm Cheryl Mitchell, the president of Treleven Inc., which is a retreat and learning center located on a sheep farm here in Addison County. And we are incredibly interested in the ways that our communities support families with young children. So it has been a pleasure to be doing Growing Bright Futures with the Building Bright Futures community, the Let's Grow Kids community, and Middlebury Community Television. And I'm also really happy that we have as our guest today Angela Scavo, who is the Breastfeeding Peer Counselor for the WIC program. So, Angela, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Oh, well, we're thrilled that you're here. And I just wanted to, I overheard something about a pink tent. So before we go any further, do you want to tell us a little bit about the pink breastfeeding tent?
Sure. So it's sort of our staple at any event we go to. It'll be up next weekend at Foodaroo. It's a neon pink tent that is for breastfeeding mothers or moms that just need a break to relax. And it's you'll find it at field days or the farmers market sometimes too. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you do as a peer counselor.
Sure.
On breastfeeding.
Sure. So WIC offers breastfeeding peer counselors to moms that are on WIC, and our job sort of is twofold. The main part is to help moms and support them with their breastfeeding goals, and so ideally they come to us when they're pregnant and we figure out what those goals are and how to help them get there and then overcome any barriers that they might have. And then the other part of it is to sort of raise community awareness and support for breastfeeding.
And how is Addison County doing as a breastfeeding community?
In general, we're doing really well. We're higher than the national average for breastfeeding. I'm not sure statewide how we are, but I think in general our rates are pretty good.
It's been very interesting. My son and his wife just adopted a baby, so they're doing bottle feeding, which I was not familiar with up until now. I just thought everybody breastfeeds, but that may not be the case anymore. Is that?
It's not. I think the national average is a little less than like 30%. I want to say like 25. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's not as high as you might think. But I think the trajectory is going that way. So I think we're coming back into more breastfeeding as opposed to formula.
So do you, when people are pregnant, is it also your role to sort of encourage them to consider breastfeeding, or are you working mostly with people that have already decided?
So yeah, so encouraging is part of it too, I think. There's a lot of people who I think just don't know about it or don't know how it works, maybe are curious. We have definitely some moms who are, they pretty sure that they don't want to breastfeed, and then they have their baby and they change their mind. And so it's really just about providing sort of information so that the mom can make any kind of informed consent, informed decision on her own.
Yes.
Yeah.
So could you talk to us a little bit about how you personally came to be doing this work?
Sure. So my son's 3.5. When he was born, I had a very traumatic delivery, and it sort of spiraled into a lot of infections that left me hospitalized 7 weeks after he was born.
Wow.
They were all breast infections. And we kept breastfeeding through it, and a large percentage of that was my peer counselor at the time, who sort of nudged me, to keep going and help me through it. She was a support. And so when WIC came hiring again a year and a half later, I was like, I just sort of jumped on the bandwagon. I said, I have to do that and help women get through it and maybe not have the same complications I had.
So how do you interact with somebody? Could you give us a scenario about, let's say somebody's coming to you and she's wondering about breastfeeding?
So, technology has become sort of a good thing and a bad thing these days. So a lot of our interactions are done over phone. It's sort of whatever your mom prefers, and so sometimes it's easier over phone or text or email. We try to encourage maybe some face visits, so we host events through WIC that they can come to and we can meet. or if they have an appointment at WIC, we can meet them there. And certainly we do home visits after the baby's born too. But it's really just a lot of conversation, so a lot of phone, a lot of text, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say are the most common challenges that people have in trying to breastfeed?
Certainly going back to work, I think, is the biggest one that I see, and how to make that work. So how to make pumping work. There's certainly a lot of businesses that aren't necessarily breastfeeding friendly, and so it can be tricky as an employee to go back. And pumping can be tricky for a lot of moms anyway, and then if you add in stress of trying to figure out how to make that work, that's another huge barrier that moms have to overcome.
So most businesses don't have breastfeeding rooms. How do moms who are on the job, where do they go?
Yeah, so that it depends, varies a lot place to place. There's a federal law that they're supposed to have a private space with a lock to go and breastfeed or pump. And there's just a lot of businesses that don't have that, and not necessarily because they're not breastfeeding friendly, but just because they don't have a policy, or maybe they've never had a breastfeeding mom or whatever. And so there's moms that, go to the bathroom, there's moms that just pump in their car, and that can be really challenging.
Yeah, especially in the winter.
Yeah. So. But we've worked with a lot of businesses to try to come up with written policies so that they can, create a space to specifically design for pumping, or a plan in place so that moms have an option of somewhere to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what kinds of change, if they don't have space, what are they doing to accommodate this?
Sure. So there's a lot of ways to make a space if you don't think you have a space, which is sort of what we help businesses try to be creative. Partitions are great, and you can make a little, cubicle type space. Certainly there's a lot of rooms that can be, that people don't think about, that can be utilized. Maybe it's a room that doesn't get used on a regular basis. Maybe it's an office that sits empty most of the time, or maybe, certainly I work at Ripton Elementary School, and so we had 3 offices that were sort of designated, so whenever one of them was empty, you could go in and shut the curtains and lock the door. So just kind of, sometimes it involves being pretty creative and seeing what you have, but you usually can work with something.
And it sounds like businesses are receptive to trying to work something. You haven't had anybody say, no, I
think more often than not, they're receptive. They want to help their employees. So they're willing to. It just can be a trick to figure it out how to make it work.
I know that there's also federal laws about how long people can stay at home with their babies, even if they can't afford to do it. How many weeks are you usually seeing women staying home before they have to go back to work?
It depends a lot of where they're employed. Generally the average that I see is 4 to 8 weeks that women have to go back, which is really tricky for a lot of reasons. Certainly pumping is a big one, but
So does WIC hand out breast pumps still?
So they do. You have to be returning to school or work in order to qualify for one, unless there's a medical condition prior to that. If you're having for example, myself had a lot of infections, so I was able to get a pump through WIC much sooner. But otherwise, the stipulation is that you have to be returning to work or school.
And those are the electric breast pumps?
Yeah. Yep. Anybody can get a hand pump from the get-go. And I encourage moms to do that because it's a useful thing to know, even if you're not going to pump. And then the electric pumps are yours to use as long as you're pumping, and then you give it back to WIC when you're done.
Nice. And do you find that most people are successful in being able to manage breastfeeding and work when they... Or do a lot of moms, try it for 3 weeks and then say, I just can't do this, I'm going to stay home with my baby?
I think it depends a lot on their individual situation. Work, certainly how supportive your work is a huge factor. Childcare is another huge factor for so many moms. And when you're breastfeeding or using pumped milk in childcare, that's like a whole nother step to overcome, because there are childcare providers who don't know or aren't necessarily as supportive. And so that can be just a whole nother obstacle itself.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you probably know now the places in the county that are friendly to giving babies, pumped breast milk, or
The childcare?
The childcare.
I think we are in an amazing spot, and I have not found a person that is at least not willing to do what they can to help. So
Yeah.
there are some providers that maybe, there's certain ways to like hold the baby to feed them a bottle so that they don't, it's called paced bottle feeding, so that they don't suck it down too fast. And so that there are providers that have been willing to like learn how to do that. So, have a conversation with them, they get through it. I have yet to meet somebody who's not willing to be part of that conversation and do what they can. But I've heard horror stories from mothers.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about this, being a new grandmother here with a bottle-fed baby?
So paced bottle feeding. So
Paced.
when babies are breastfeeding, they have to work. It's a job for them. Milk just doesn't come out. They have to suck to get it to come out. Whereas typically when you hold a baby and give them a bottle, you're holding the bottle up, and so it just makes the milk come out. They don't really have to work that hard. And so for a baby that's breastfeeding as well, that can be kind of challenging, because then they go back to the breast and they're like, what? That don't work, And so paced bottle feeding is when you hold the baby up a little bit, the bottle down a little bit, so they actually have to suck a little bit harder. So it's similar to breastfeeding as opposed to the milk just flowing.
Coming down.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know everybody knows this. Well, maybe everybody doesn't know this. Can you talk about the advantages of breastfeeding, even if there's difficulties in maintaining it?
Sure. So there's lots of advantages. I mean, if you want to talk purely from the basics, for one, it's significantly cheaper. Formula is very, very expensive. It's easier. Even if you're pumping, there's limited bottles to clean and sanitize. And actually, a little unknown fact is that women who are breastfeeding actually get better quality sleep than women who are formula
Really?
feeding, which I think for new moms is a huge,
I think the myth is out there that if you're breastfeeding, you'll never sleep again.
It's actually because your body produces hormones that are designed for you to sleep better and your baby to sleep better, and they get them in the milk, and so you get into that deep sleep faster than if you're not breastfeeding. And then that's that's in addition to all the health benefits to mom and baby. Baby has better immune system and is less susceptible to ear infections and things like that. And mom herself there's lower rates of breast cancers and some other pretty significant illnesses as well. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So, and what's the word in the health department world or on the street or in WIC about how long do people usually breastfeed? Is it the baby's choice? Is it the mother's choice?
Sure. So again, it depends. So the WHO recommends. Oh my goodness!
WHO meaning World Health Organization.
The World Health recommends 2 years. The one in the United States, and I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on it. It says at least a year is good, with being up to 6 months exclusively breastfed, and then after 6 months you can start solid food, in addition to being breastfed. I have moms that are happy with making it to the 6 month mark and then switching over to food and being done. I have moms that keep nursing and let their child wean at 2 or 3 years old. The worldwide average for weaning is like 4.5. So
Wow.
America, like our year recommendation is a lot lower
Way
than
lower.
the world average.
Yeah.
So.
I'm just thinking, my daughter is still breastfeeding. Her daughter's almost 3.
Okay.
But she's, it's been a difficult challenge, mostly
Sure.
for the emotional support. She says at this point, maybe not so much for the health benefits, but it's such a great time for moms and babies to bond.
It is. It is. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that the worldwide average was 4.5.
It makes you rethink things a little bit.
It does.
For sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, are you willing to stay as a counselor? Can you stay with women through the weaning process as well, or do you have a set amount of time that you work with them?
Yeah, so WIC only provides our support through the first year of the baby. So when baby turns 1, we technically are moving on, although I think a fair amount of my moms I'm still in contact with, and certainly if they have questions. You know, that's one of the advantages of being in a small community. I still see a lot of my moms.
Right.
And so, you know, if there's a question, they can shoot me an email or a text or something. I don't know that I've had very many moms that have made it farther, like past a year, that have come up with additional questions. I mean, it's usually past that, they'll send me an email,
yeah.
things are great, or, you know, we just stopped breastfeeding one day, you know, that sort of thing is usually the check-in that I get.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said that there were some group meetings that WIC sponsors?
Yeah, so WIC does a lot. So we do we do a WIC baby shower 4 times a year. Our next one is August 2nd, and it's a come together at the WIC office, and we have snacks, and there's free clothes and free books, and people can just hang out and chat. I'm starting a mommy play group the 4th Wednesday of June, July, and August at 10 at the new rec center. That'll just be a similar sort of, you know, get together for moms to get information or hang out, network, that sort of thing. And then there's, you know, lots of play groups. There's La Leche League. There's a group at the Ilsley Library that meets. Those are specific to breastfeeding. But there are some, you know, great opportunities for women to get out.
Sounds
Families,
wonderful.
not
Families
just
to
women.
get out, right? How do you involve the dads? Or
You know, I think it's up to them to decide whether or not they want to get involved. You know, sometimes it's seen, a lot of times it's seen just between mom and baby. But, you know, dads, I think, are a necessary component to that. You know, they have to be there to support mom in, you know, whatever way, you know, whether it's bringing her water or giving her hugs or, you know, whatever sort of thing that they can do. And certainly if they're not on board with breastfeeding, that makes it a lot trickier for mom. So I encourage dads to come to the meetings, the showers. We certainly have a fair amount that do. And they're welcome at my mommy play group as well. But I think any sort of involvement that they can have is a bonus, and it's a bonus in general too for the breastfeeding, you know, larger breastfeeding picture, to have dads involved and to say that there's men that support breastfeeding too.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I'm wondering, it sounds like you're involved in a lot of aspects of the community, not just peer counseling, but you work at the Ripton School.
I do.
Could you talk a little bit in general about your sense of Addison County as a place to raise kids? Are there things that are great? Are there things that you wish you saw?
Sure. So I grew up in a big city, so coming to Middlebury was Spokane, Washington, Eastern Washington. And I've been here for about 10 years, give or take. And so it was sort of a shock to come to Middlebury. Middlebury is very small. I was born in a small town in Wyoming, but we moved away, you know, when I was like 8. So to come back to a small town was really nice, because, you know, there's a definite sense of like, okay, I know people, I know, you know, where to go, I know my resources, that sort of thing. And there can be cons about that too, you know, certainly, you know, knowing too many people, I think, can be problematic for some. But I think that Addison County is an amazing community. It's not just a group of people who sort of interact every once in a while. I think in general we are blessed, like, with the village that we have. You know, there's a lot of activities that are in Middlebury that sort of bring people together. There's a lot for people to do as the community. And I think that's so very important to being a family and having kids. It's easy to get isolated. It's easy to live in your own little bubble. And as a parent, I think that makes it so much harder when you're stuck in your own little bubble. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was just in relation to breastfeeding friendly childcare programs, or have you had interactions with the childcare community? Do you feel like there are enough spaces? Do we need more? What's your sense of this?
Yeah, so I worked in childcare before moving on to the Addison County School District, and there's definitely not enough childcare, and I don't think that's specific to Addison County. I think that's specific everywhere, and you know, I think that we don't pay our childcare providers enough money,
Right.
and so they're hard to find, and there's not a lot of people that want to get into the business. And that makes it really hard for parents and families for lots of reasons. But it also makes it hard for the kids, you know, when they don't have what they need. And at 6, they're going into kindergarten when maybe they should have had support years before that.
Right, right.
So I think it's frustrating, and I hope that we go in the right direction.
I think we all have our fingers crossed. I think that Let's Grow Kids
Yeah.
and some of the new
Yeah.
universal pre-K will start to
Yeah.
change it so that people are actually paid decent
Yeah.
wages. And
I think it's a
that'll
start in the
change
right
things.
direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is your background in child development?
So my background is in psychology and counseling. I actually am trying to start up a private practice working with kids. Most of my work has been done with kids on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, and or with a history of trauma. I see a lot of kids in elementary school and older that have a significant history of trauma that's being manifested in ways that people don't realize is because of the trauma. And so that's sort of my background, and one of the incentives to work with moms prenatally, but then also as soon as their kids are born, is to sort of break that cycle and help sort of prevent some of that trauma and give them a better chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you done that kind of work here in the county, or was that from Spokane?
So I've been working in Addison County a little bit. I used to work at the Sapphire Center, which was in
yes.
New Haven, which abruptly closed in March, which was very sad.
I know, it was very sad when that closed.
Yeah. And so I have a couple kiddos down in Rutland County that I work for now. And mostly, I haven't done a whole lot of it. Mostly I've just been at Ripton School and with WIC. But I'm hoping to sort of branch out a little bit more.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were able to keep breastfeeding through an infection. So how did you do that?
Oh, a lot of pain and suffering. So I had to pump every hour and a half. So my infection I had mastitis, and then I had thrush, which was a yeast infection, and then I had mastitis again. The mastitis, the second time that I got, was what I was hospitalized for. They actually thought I had MRSA, but that's not what it was.
Oh, good.
But yeah, it was, I had to pump every hour and a half, and still tried to nurse on it, and it was super, super painful.
Angela.
And I didn't realize at the time that it was as bad as it was. I mean, I knew it was bad. I knew it hurt. But I didn't realize until I was at the hospital, and the doctor that saw me actually swore when she first saw me, because she was like, it was that bad. And then it was like, oh, okay, it's that bad. So yeah, perseverance, really. I mean, I think I am stubborn, and I was sort of determined to keep going, and so I did.
So you just plowed through.
And I have a huge support network too, so that makes a difference.
So were you on the phone with your peer counselor every hour and a half?
I talked to her a lot, and I remember calling her in the middle of the night crying and saying, what the heck is wrong? I can't do this. And and she would say, no, you can do this, and she would sort of coach me through it. My partner, who's very supportive of breastfeeding, was sort of like, are you really making the right choice, because he was watching me be in so much pain.
Oh, yeah.
And so she was the one my peer counselor was the one who was like, no, you're good, sort of my rock through it all.
Oh, that's great to know.
Yeah.
So we're going to run out of time, I'm afraid. Is there anything that you wanted to share with people that I forgot to ask here?
No, I think the one thing I want to share is to encourage people to look into WIC. It's income based, but you qualify for it. If your kids are on Dr. Dinosaur, you automatically qualify. So I encourage people to look into it and see if they qualify, if they're interested.
That's great. So in a minute, your contact information is going to come up. Would they get WIC from the same contact information?
Yep.
Do you
So
think?
it's all on the website, and the office phone number is the one that'll come up, and they can call the office if they have questions or if they're interested in seeing if they're eligible.
Great. Well, thank you
Thank you.
much, Angela, for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to be with us
Yeah,
today.
that's great.
And thank you all who are watching the program today also for taking the time to watch. I really want to thank also Middlebury Community Television and Kurt Broderson, who has taught us everything that we know. He currently is teaching Dana Anderson, who's the coordinator of Building Bright Futures in our county, how to produce shows. So if you want to learn how to get information out there, if you have a nonprofit or just an issue that you would like to get out to the public, please give them a call. And thank you so much for watching us. I hope you'll tune in again.